Hook. Three riders came hard into the Crane yard Tuesday morning with Emmett miles away on the north fence. Russell Gaines stayed mounted while the man beside him opened a leather case. Gordon Slade, County Assessor. Official boundary reassessment. Slade raised a map toward the porch. Nora studied it for 4 seconds. 200 acres, including the disputed creek bed, had shifted toward Gaines. That map does not match our deed. She asked for the county seal, filing date, and the 30-day written notice required before reassessment. Slade's hands went still. Is there such a notice, Mr. Slade? The assessor looked at Russell. Russell looked back at Nora. Neither man answered. She was 27 years old and nobody had ever chosen her. Not once. Not for the seat by the window. Not for the introduction that came with pride and a father's voice. Not for anything that mattered in the quiet arithmetic of a family that had already decided which daughter was worth the investment. Then the most powerful man in the county walked into her family's parlor on a Thursday morning and said her name like it was the only name in the room. But they did not know that his decision would unearth a secret buried for 20 years beneath the ground itself, literally beneath it. If you love stories about ordinary people who rise when no one believes they can, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. Let us see how far this story travels, because what Nora Hadley is about to do will change everything. Now let us begin. The Hadley family had a way of making things clear without ever speaking them out loud. It lived in the way Marjorie Hadley set the dinner table every evening. Vivian always got the chair closest to the window, where the late afternoon light caught her golden hair at just the right angle. It lived in the way their father, Howard Hadley, introduced his daughters to visitors. And this is Vivian, our pride, he would say, with a broad sweep of his hand and a voice full of warmth. Then, almost as an afterthought, a loose gesture toward the back of the room. And Nora. Just the name. No pride, no warmth, tossed out like a receipt after a purchase you never really wanted to make. Nora understood this system. She had understood it since she was old enough to notice which daughter got called into the parlor when guests arrived and which daughter got told to bring the coffee. But understanding was not the same thing as accepting. Acceptance would have broken something inside her that she could not afford to let break. Understanding simply made her careful. Careful where she stepped. Careful what she said. Careful not to want things too loudly, because wanting things out loud in the Hadley household meant watching her father hand them to Vivian instead. She was 27. She had calluses on both palms from mending fences her father claimed were too difficult for women. She had a scar running along her left forearm from a barbed wire tangle she had fixed alone at 17 because the ranch hand had quit that week and her father had not noticed yet. She could read weather better than most men in the county, could feel a shift in the air 3 hours before the clouds confirmed it. She had birthed a calf in a March rainstorm with nothing but a lantern and her bare hands kneeling in mud at 3 in the morning while the rest of the house slept. None of that had ever made it into her father's introductions. Not once. But there was something else Nora knew. Something she had never told anyone. When she was 14 years old, she had taught herself to read her father's cattle ledgers. He kept them locked in the bottom drawer of his desk, and it took her 3 weeks to work the lock open without leaving a mark. 2 more weeks to make sense of the numbers inside. What she found was that Howard Hadley was not nearly as successful as he told people he was. He knew it. He was afraid of it. And that fear was the engine behind every arrangement he tried to make, every deal he pushed, every desperate move to position his family through strategy rather than honest building. There was one entry she never understood. A debt of $2,000 owed to someone listed only as RG. No full name, no explanation. Just 2 letters and a number that her father never seemed to pay down. She filed it away in the back of her mind the way she filed everything. Carefully, completely, waiting for the day it would make sense. It was a Thursday morning when everything began to shift. Nora was in the kitchen the way she always was at that hour, up before anyone else, because the bread did not rise on its own and the coffee did not brew itself. And someone in this house had to think about the practical things before the day demanded them. She was pulling a pan from the oven when she heard the creak of wagon wheels outside, and then the particular sound her father made when he was trying to be impressive. That deep, cleared throat, chest out, chin up sound that meant company had arrived. Important company. She moved to the window without touching the curtain, a habit she had learned young. Look, but do not be seen looking. Emmett Crane. She recognized him before she saw his face. Recognized the straight-backed way he sat in a saddle. Recognized the gray roan horse he rode. recognized the unhurried certainty of a man who had never once in his life walked into a room wondering whether he belonged there. Emmett Crane was 33. He owned the largest cattle operation in a two-county radius. He had built it himself, had not inherited it, had not married into it, had not borrowed his way into it. He had started with 40 head of cattle, a piece of land most people thought was worthless, and what old Clarence at the feed store liked to call an unreasonable amount of stubbornness. Nora pulled back from the window and set the bread pan on the cooling rack. She heard her father's voice, big and booming. "Emmett, come in, come in." She heard her mother's quick feet scurrying down the hallway toward Vivian's room. "Vivian, wake up. Emmett Crane is here." Nora heard it clearly through the thin wall, the groggy complaint, the urgent whisper, the specific rustling sound of someone being rushed into a nicer dress. She kept working. She sliced the bread. She set the coffee on the table. She put out the good cups because her mother would notice if she used the everyday ones, and she did not want to hear about it for a week. She straightened the tablecloth. She moved the flower arrangement 2 inches to the left so it would not block the sight line from the head of the table. She worked quietly, efficiently, the way she always did. Her father brought Emmett into the dining room 8 minutes later. Nora heard them before she saw them. Her father's voice big and performing. Emmett's voice lower, measured, real. "Finest county in the state, and I will stand by that," her father was saying. "I will not argue it," Emmett said. Nora stepped back toward the kitchen doorway. Her father saw her. "Ah, Emmett, you know my daughter Nora." The briefest pause. She helps around the house. She watched Emmett turn, and the thing she noticed first, the thing that stayed with her later when she turned it over and over in her mind, was that he did not look through her. Most men did that when they had already decided which daughter they were there to see. They looked past the other one the way you look past furniture. Emmett Crane looked at her. "Morning, Miss Hadley," he said. "Morning," she said, and moved back into the kitchen before she could do something foolish like hold his gaze too long. Vivian made her entrance 4 minutes later. Nora did not watch it. She did not need to. She had seen enough of them to know exactly how it went. The careful pause in the doorway, the soft smile, the slight tilt of the chin that caught the light just right. Vivian was not unintelligent. She had simply learned, as all of them had, what this household rewarded. Nora heard her father's pleased voice, her mother's delighted murmur, the scrape of chairs being adjusted. Then her father's voice, louder, directed at the kitchen doorway. "Nora, bring the coffee." She brought the coffee. She poured it without making eye contact with anyone. She was already turning back toward the kitchen when Emmett spoke. "Miss Hadley, Nora, would you sit down?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. She turned around slowly. Her father was staring at Emmett with the polite confusion of a man trying to recalibrate. Her mother's smile had gone slightly fixed. Vivian was looking at Emmett with the first hint of a frown. "She has things to see to," her father said smoothly. "The coffee is poured," Emmett said. He was not rude. He was not aggressive. He was simply a man who stated things as they were, because in his experience, that was how things worked best. "Miss Nora, please sit." Nora sat. She told herself it was because refusing would have made a scene, and she did not make scenes. But the honest part of her, the part that lived very quietly behind all the careful and all the invisible, knew it was because something in the way he said "please" sounded like he actually meant it. The conversation moved the way those conversations always moved. Her father talked about land, about cattle prices, about the upcoming county fair and the quality of this season's beef. Vivian offered a few bright practice comments and a laugh that arrived exactly when laughs were supposed to arrive. Emmett listened to all of it. He answered what he was asked. He was not impatient. But twice that Nora counted, when her father said something that was slightly overstated or politely untrue, she caught Emmett's eyes moving briefly toward her, almost imperceptibly, like he was checking her reaction. Like her reaction was the real information in the room. She kept her face still and her hands folded in her lap and said nothing. After breakfast, after Marjorie had taken Vivian away to demonstrate her embroidery, Howard Hadley settled into his armchair with the particular satisfaction of a man who believed everything was going according to plan. "Well," he said in the voice he used when he thought he was being subtle, "I imagine you can see what we have here, Emmett. A fine girl. A well-raised girl. She would be a credit to any household." He meant Vivian. Everyone in the room understood he meant Vivian. Emmett set his coffee cup down with precise quietness. "I can see what you have here, Howard. I have actually been able to see it for some time. That is why I wanted to speak with you today. Howard beamed. About a marriage arrangement, Emmett said, though not the one you are thinking of. The beam flickered. I want to ask for Nora's hand, Emmett said. The room went dead silent. Nora heard it from the kitchen doorway. She had come back to collect the cups. She was standing 3 feet from the door when the words reached her, and she felt them the way you feel a sudden cold gust. Not painfully, not pleasantly, but with the full body shock of something you were never braced for. Her father made a sound she had never heard him make before, a stuttering, recalibrating sound, like a man who had prepared a speech and been handed the wrong occasion. Nora? Not Vivian? I mean Nora, Emmett said. She is the older one, Howard said, as though this explained something. I am aware, Emmett said. Vivian is better suited, Howard started. Better suited for what? Emmett asked. His voice was quiet and entirely serious. For what exactly, Howard? Silence. Nora made herself walk into the room. She did not know why. She only knew that if she stood in that doorway 1 second longer, something in her chest was going to either break or explode, and she was not going to let either of those things happen in a kitchen doorway. She walked in. She stood beside the table. She looked at Emmett Crane. What did you say? She asked. She needed to hear it again, not through a wall. Emmett looked at her directly. I told your father I would like to speak with you about a marriage arrangement between you and me. A brief pause, if you are willing to hear it. Why? She said. It was not the polite question. The polite question would have been something softer, but Nora had never been much for polite questions when real ones were available. Emmett almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. Could we speak privately? Her father objected. Of course he did. But Emmett Crane was a man who owned 4,000 acres and carried 20 years of solid reputation. And Howard Hadley was a man who owed money at the bank and had 2 daughters to see settled. In the arithmetic of this county, that meant Howard's objection lasted approximately 45 seconds before found pressing business on the far end of the porch. They stood in the parlor. Nora kept the dish towel in her hands because she did not know what else to do with them, and she was not going to twist them together like a woman who was frightened. She was not frightened. She told herself that firmly. I have been watching your family for a while, Emmett began. Most people watch Vivian, Nora said. I know. I watched her too, early on. She is charming and she is pretty, and she has been raised to be exactly what she is. He paused, but I have been watching you. Last March, he said, during the storm, the one that came in fast from the northwest before anyone was ready for it, she remembered. One of our cows had gotten through the fence line, Emmett continued. She wandered close to your property. I went looking for her in the dark and I found her about 50 yards from your barn. He looked at Nora steadily. I also found you, knee-deep in mud in the middle of that storm, a lantern in one hand and your arm inside a breech calf that would have died without you. You did not call for help, he said. You did not wait. You just did what needed doing. The calf needed to be turned, she said, because that was the plain fact of it. I want to marry you, he said, because when things went wrong and no one was watching, you did not hesitate. That is not a romantic reason. No, she said flatly. It is not. It is a real one, he said. And I would rather start with a real reason than a romantic one that evaporates the first hard winter. She searched his face for the place where that was performance. She searched for pity, for the uncomfortable charity of a man offering something to a woman he felt sorry for. She did not find it. What she found instead was a man looking back at her with careful attention. My father wants Vivian settled with you, she said. Your father wants the financial security that comes with my name, Emmett said evenly. That does not change my question. She did not answer him that morning. She asked for time and he gave it without pressuring, without the weighted silence of a man who expected gratitude in advance. He nodded, thanked her for hearing him out, and went to find her father. That evening, Nora stood at the kitchen counter with both hands flat on the wood and her eyes on the middle distance. She turned the question from every side. She checked the reasoning for soft places. He wanted her because she had not hesitated in a storm, because she did what needed doing when no one was watching. Those were not small things. She knew enough about what women were usually wanted for to know those were not small things. But knowing you are valued for real reasons and knowing how to trust that valuation were two different skills, and she was not sure she had practiced the second one enough. Marjorie found her at the end of the evening sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of tea. She sat down across from Nora and folded her hands. He is serious, Marjorie said. I know, Nora said. What do you see? Her mother asked. The question surprised Nora. It was more direct than her mother usually was. "I see a man who looked at me like I was actually there," Nora said quietly. Her mother was silent for a moment. "That is more than most women get," she said finally. It was not encouragement. It was not discouragement. It was a fact delivered in the flat voice of a woman who had been doing the arithmetic of her own choices for 30 years. Nora made her decision just before midnight, not in a rush, not in a fever. In the same quiet way she made all decisions that mattered. Alone, with clear eyes, after looking at the thing from every direction, she sent word to Emmett the next morning. The message was short. She was not a woman who used 5 words when 2 would do. "I will hear the rest. NH." His reply came within the hour. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I will come to you." E.C. Emmett arrived at 10 exactly. Nora opened the door before her father could get there first. That was intentional. Howard had spent breakfast trying to position himself as the architect of whatever was about to happen. Nora had listened, finished her coffee, and walked to the front door 30 seconds before the knock came. Emmett spoke plainly. "I want to be clear about what I am offering," he said. "I am not offering a fairy story. What I am offering is a partnership. Equal say. Your name on the deed from the first day. That is not negotiable on my end." Nora felt the weight of those words. "Your name on the deed. I have conditions," she said. Her father's chair creaked sharply behind them. Emmett did not blink. "Let us hear them." "I will run the household on my own terms," she said. "No interference. If I see something being done wrong on the ranch, I say so directly without being told it is not my place. And if this does not work, if this becomes something neither of us can live with, I want the ability to say so without being made to feel that I failed at the only thing a woman is supposed to succeed at." Emmett looked at her for a long moment. "If we ever reach a place where we cannot find our way through together, I give you my word you will walk away with your dignity intact and your name respected. That is a promise." She searched his face for the seam where that was performance. She did not find one. "Then I accept," she said. Her father came out of his chair. "Now just a moment, Papa." Nora's voice was quiet and perfectly level. This has been decided. 27 years and she had never spoken to him that way. Not sharply, not with trembling. Just the plain truth in the same tone she used when she told the ranch hands where to mend the fence line. Howard Hadley sat down. If you love stories about ordinary people who stand their ground when the world tells them to step aside, hit subscribe. Because what Nora says to Emmett Crane is about to change everything. Word moved through the county faster than horses. 3 versions formed by Thursday afternoon. In the first, Nora had somehow trapped Emmett. In the second, Howard had arranged it all along, and Vivian had graciously stepped aside. In the third, circulating among the women at the dry goods store, Emmett had taken one look at Nora Hadley and gone dead silent in the middle of the parlor, which was romantic enough that nobody wanted to examine it too closely. None of these were accurate. The truth was simpler. A man had watched a woman do a hard thing well and decided that was what he wanted beside him for the rest of his life. Opal Trent arrived at the Hadley house on Friday morning with a basket of preserves and the very specific energy of a woman who had organized a reason to be somewhere. She was 55, sharp-tongued, church-attending, and the closest thing the county had to an official record of everyone's business. "I will be direct," Opal said. "People are talking. Some of them are saying Emmett Crane has made a mistake, that he has passed over Vivian, who is the more obvious choice." Nora set her teacup down. "The more obvious choice for what?" "For a man of his standing," Opal said, "his social position. To look a certain way at church and smile at the right dinners," Nora said. "To be a decoration that reflects well on him." She looked at Opal steadily. "Is that what you would want for your daughter?" Opal opened her mouth and then to her credit closed it. "Emmett Crane runs 4,000 acres," Nora said quietly. "He needs someone who can think on her feet, who does not panic in a crisis, and who will tell him the truth when everyone else tells him what he wants to hear." She picked up her teacup. "I have been doing those things my whole life. I just was not doing them for anyone who noticed." Opal looked at her for a long moment. Something genuine shifted in the older woman's eyes. "Well," she said, "I suppose that is a different way of looking at it." "It is the accurate way," Nora said. Opal left 40 minutes later. Nora was fairly certain the 4th version of the story, a considerably better one, would be circulating by Sunday. 5 days before the wedding, Dale Mossman, Emmett's foreman of 20 years, came to the Hadley property. Broad, weathered, 48 years old, he talked to Nora for 20 minutes about hay prices that neither of them cared about. Then he arrived at the real thing. "Some of the men are not sure what to make of this," he said. They respect Emmett, they trust his judgment. But they are adjusting to the idea of a woman having weight in the decisions. Are you one of them? Nora asked. I was, he said. Past tense. What changed? I heard what you said to Opal Trent, and I was the one who found that breech calf alive in March. Did not know who saved it until recently. That calf is 300 pounds now. Healthiest animal on the property. He touched the brim of his hat and left. Nora stood in the yard after he was gone and felt something loosen in her chest. Something she had not known was wound tight. 2 days before the wedding, Howard knocked on Nora's bedroom door. He had not done that since she was a child. He stood in the doorway with his hat in his hands. I owe you an apology, he said. I raised you to be useful, and I raised Vivian to be chosen, and I thought that was practical. He stopped. I was wrong. Emmett Crane chose you, not because I arranged it, because of who you are. I should have been the first one to see that. Nora could have said many things. She had 27 years of inventory. Every time she had been the afterthought. Every introduction where her name came second. Every morning she had gotten up first and gone to bed last and been thanked for none of it. She looked at her father and chose the one thing that was actually useful. Come to the wedding, Papa. Stand up straight and look like you meant it all along. That evening, Vivian found Nora on the back porch. She sat down without asking, which was the most direct thing Vivian had done in years. He was just the plan, Vivian said quietly. Papa's plan. I do not think I wanted him specifically. I do not think I thought about it that hard. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Nora was not expecting. Papa had a conversation with Emmett 3 weeks ago before you gave your answer. I was not supposed to hear it. I heard it. Nora waited. Papa told him he was making a mistake, Vivian said. Told him you were difficult, stubborn, that you had ideas above your station, that you would be more trouble than you were worth. He told him that if he reconsidered, the arrangement with me was still available. The yard noise continued around them, distant, unreal. Emmett said something back, Vivian said. And this is the part I have been thinking about every day since. What did he say? Nora asked. Vivian's voice dropped. He said, Howard, every single thing you just described is exactly why I want her. A woman without stubbornness breaks in the first hard season. A woman with ideas built this county alongside the men who got the credit for it. And if you think difficulty is a flaw, it is because you have been surrounded by easy things your whole life, and none of them have lasted. Nora stood very still. The wave moved through her, and she let it move because she had learned long ago that was more efficient than bracing against it. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Because you needed to know what kind of man you married, Vivian said simply. And because I needed to say it out loud to someone. I needed to stop carrying it. Nora did something she had not done in longer than she could precisely remember. She pulled Vivian in and held on. And Vivian held back. And for a moment, the gap of all those years of careful distance collapsed into something real. You are going to be all right, Nora said. I know, Vivian said. I think you finally will be too, but stay until the end, because the wedding is not the best part. What Nora finds when she steps into the Crane Ranch will change not only her life but the entire power map of this county. That night, Nora lay in the dark and could not sleep, not from fear. She had checked carefully, and fear was not present in any significant quantity. It was something harder to name. The disorientation of a woman who had spent years arranging herself to expect very little, suddenly standing at the edge of something enormous. And then, for the first time since Emmett said her name in the parlor, she allowed a question she had been pushing away all week to rise to the surface. What if he was wrong? What if what he saw that night in the storm was not who she really was, but only her best version, and the real version would not be enough? She lay there and felt the weight of that question. 27 years of not being enough had built that weight. Then she thought about the calf. She had not saved it because someone was watching. She saved it because it needed saving, and she was there. That was exactly who she was. Not the best version, the only version. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow the whole county would be watching. And then, with a quietness that surprised her, let them watch. The morning of the wedding arrived with the kind of clarity that mornings have when something is about to change in a way that cannot be changed back. Nora dressed without fuss. She had never been a woman who made much of ceremony for its own sake. But she took her time because she understood that today was the day the world was going to see her differently, and she wanted to be sure she was seeing herself clearly first. She stood in front of the mirror in the dress her mother had altered. Marjorie had done it quietly 2 nights ago without being asked. taken it in at the waist and let it out at the shoulders, because Nora was broader there than fashion usually accounted for. Broader from years of work that fashion never celebrated. She looked at herself. For the first time in a very long time, she looked without immediately turning away. A knock at her door. "They are ready," her mother said. Nora straightened her shoulders the way she did when she was about to do something that required her full attention. Then she opened the door and walked out to meet what came next. The parlor was full. More people had come than she expected. Not just family, but neighbors. A collection of county faces assembled with the particular energy of people who had heard there was something worth seeing. She felt their eyes as she walked through the room. The specific weight of collective attention she had spent most of her life avoiding, she walked through it without stopping. Emmett was standing at the far end of the room with Reverend Whitfield and Dale Mossman beside him. He saw her when she came through the doorway, and something in his face, that steady, measured face that gave nothing away it had not decided to give, went briefly and entirely unguarded. She held that, just for a moment. She held it like something precious. Howard stood in the second row with his chin up the way Nora had asked him to, looking like a man who had planned this from the beginning. Marjorie had her hands folded and her eyes bright. Vivian stood at her mother's side and watched her sister with an expression that had moved over the course of the week into something very close to quiet pride. Reverend Whitfield opened his Bible, and the room went quiet. He moved through the words with the care of a man who understood he was not the center of what was happening. The attention in this room was not the soft, sentimental attention of a wedding crowd. It was sharper, more alert, the kind of attention a room gives when it suspects something is about to happen that it will be talking about for years. "Do you, Emmett Crane, take this woman?" "I do," Emmett said, not waiting for the end of the sentence. Clear and immediate, the way he said everything he meant. "And do you, Nora Hadley, take this man to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," she said, and she meant every syllable of it. "Then by the authority vested in me," Reverend Whitfield said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Emmett turned to her fully, not the half-turn of a man managing an obligation. He raised his hand and set it against the side of her face, and it was the gentleness of it that undid her. This man who handled cattle and barbed wire and land disputes with contained force, touching the side of her face like she was something he had been waiting a long time to be careful with. The kiss was not brief. It was not a spectacle. It was the kind of kiss that happens between two people who have both quietly been bracing for something good and then been surprised by it anyway. It lasted long enough that the room knew it was real. Long enough that Reverend Whitfield found a renewed interest in his Bible. Long enough that Opal Trent stopped breathing for 4 full seconds. Howard started to clap, a startled clap, the clap of a man who began applauding before he had fully decided to. And it was the most genuine thing Howard Hadley had done in a parlor in years. The sound broke the spell, and then everyone was clapping, and Nora opened her eyes, and Emmett was looking at her. "Well," he said quietly so only she could hear, "that went differently than I planned." "Did you plan it?" she asked. "I planned to be appropriate," he said. The corner of his mouth moved into the fullest expression she had seen from him. "You happened," he said simply. The reception was held at the Hadley property. Tables in the yard. Food that half the neighboring women had contributed without being asked, because that was what you did in a county like this when a wedding happened. Nora handled it the way she handled unfamiliar terrain, carefully. Without performing either confidence she did not feel or discomfort she did. She stood beside Emmett and shook hands and received congratulations and smiled at the right moments. A young woman arrived alone in the early afternoon, 28 years old, dark-haired, quietly dressed. She came to Nora directly, not to anyone else, and offered her hand. "Congratulations, Mrs. Crane," she said. Her voice was warm, and her eyes were steady, and something about the way she carried herself suggested she had practice at being in rooms where she did not quite belong. "I am Jolene Gaines." Nora registered the last name instantly. "My father did not come," Jolene said. "You know why?" Nora studied her face for a moment. Jolene Gaines did not look like Russell Gaines. She did not carry herself like Russell Gaines. There was something careful in her expression, something that spoke of years, spent watching a difficult man and learning what not to become. "Thank you for coming," Nora said. Jolene nodded once. She did not stay long, but Nora filed the encounter away the way she filed everything that might matter later. The first real test arrived 20 minutes into the reception. Russell Gaines, 62 years old. He owned the property that bordered the south side of Emmett's ranch, and he had been engaged in a dispute with Emmett over water access for the better part of 3 years. He came to Nora, not to Emmett, to Nora. She understood immediately that this was calculated. He had decided the new wife was the soft approach. "Congratulations, Mrs. Crane," he said with a smile that had the temperature of a December well. "I imagine you will be getting settled in over at the Crane Ranch now, finding your feet." A man gets distracted with married life. He paused. "I thought perhaps now might be a good time to revisit the water access question. Fresh start and all. You thought," Nora said, "that today would be a good time to approach me about a property dispute." "At my wedding reception, Mr. Gaines," she said in the same even tone she used when she was explaining something to someone who should have understood it already. "I do not know the full details of the water access question yet. I will by the end of this month because I intend to learn everything about that property from the deed to the fence line. And when I do, if there is a legitimate conversation to be had, my husband and I will have it with you at an appropriate time and place. Today is not that time. This is not that place. Enjoy the food." Marjorie Hadley made the pie herself, and it is extraordinary. She turned away from him and found Emmett 3 feet behind her holding 2 glasses of lemonade. He had heard all of it. "You know about the Gaines dispute," he said. "Dale mentioned the broad strokes," she said. He looked at her with something new, admiration and amusement in equal measure. He handed her a glass. "You have been preparing," he said. "I prepare for everything," she said. "You knew that already." Late that night, after the last guest had gone and the yard was quiet, Nora stood alone in the kitchen of the Crane Ranch house, her new home, the place where her name was now on the deed. She put both hands flat on the oak table and realized they were shaking, not from fear, from the weight of everything that had shifted in a single day. This morning she had been the Hadley daughter who helped in the kitchen. Tonight she was Mrs. Crane, name on the deed of 4,000 acres, the woman who had told Russell Gaines to come back another day in front of half the county. The distance between those two things was dizzying, and for the first time Nora let herself feel it instead of controlling it. She did not cry, but she stood there long enough for Emmett to find her. He did not ask what was wrong. He stood beside her in the quiet kitchen until she was ready. "I am fine," she said. "I just need a minute to get used to standing here instead of standing at a kitchen door looking out." "Take as many minutes as you need," he said. That was the first night she slept at the Crane Ranch. She slept deeper than she had in months. Have you ever opened an old ledger and found something inside it that made you understand why someone fought so hard for so long? Subscribe. Because what Nora finds in the third dusty ledger on the Crane Ranch will shift the balance of everything. Dale had the ledgers pulled by 7 the next morning. Nora was already at the table when he brought them in. Emmett came in 10 minutes later, saw her with the first ledger open and a pencil in her hand, poured his coffee, sat down across from her, and pulled the second ledger toward himself. They worked in silence for 40 minutes while the ranch woke around them. Nora found the water lease problem in the second day of reading. The original agreement with the Gaines property defined seasonal access as April through September. Language drafted by Emmett's father decades ago when the herd was small and the dispute did not exist. The language had never been updated when the herd tripled in size. So Gaines has been leveraging the vagueness of seasonal ever since, Nora said. He argues October access is a violation, Emmett said. It is not a violation, Nora said. It is a drafting oversight he is choosing to interpret in his favor. You need a lawyer to rewrite this language before spring, not to fight Gaines, to make the fight irrelevant. By the end of the first week, she had read every ledger, identified a feed supplier overcharging by 12% on a standing order that had never been reviewed, spoken with Dale twice about the eastern fence line, and learned the name of every man on the property, every name. Because she had spent years being managed by people who did not know her name, and she understood exactly what that communicated about how much a person mattered. The discovery came at the end of the second week, the oldest ledger, handwritten by Emmett's father in ink that had faded to the color of weak tea, between 2 pages of cattle purchase records, an envelope sealed shut and never opened since it had been placed there. Nora worked it open carefully. Inside was a legal document, a recorded claim for subsurface water rights covering the entirety of the Crane property and extending into the disputed boundary zone with the Gaines land. Purchased 22 years ago for almost nothing, because at the time no one understood what it would be worth. A handwritten note was tucked behind the document. She recognized Emmett's father's handwriting from the ledger entries. It read, "Keep this. Tell no one until the time comes. Water is gold. They will come for it." Nora sat very still. The pieces rearranged themselves in her mind with the swift precision of a woman who had been reading hidden information since she was 14 years old. This was why Russell Gaines had been aggressive for 3 years. Not because of 4 cattle drifting through a fence, not because of seasonal water access language. Russell Gaines knew or suspected that there was something far more valuable beneath that disputed land, and he had been using the surface water dispute as a legal wedge to gradually claim control over the territory above it. She folded the document and put it in her apron pocket and went to find Emmett. She showed him that evening after the hands had gone. He read the document twice. "My father never mentioned this," he said. His voice was quiet. "He hid it in the ledger," Nora said, "in a place where only someone who actually read every page would find it." Emmett looked at her. They both understood what that meant. They decided to hold the information. Wait for Russell to reveal more of his position before they played the card his own father had buried for exactly this moment. Then something else clicked into place. "RG," she said, "the debt in my father's ledger, $2,000. RG Russell Gaines." She watched Emmett absorb that. The lines connected themselves. Russell had not only been pressuring the Crane Ranch. He had wrapped himself around the Hadley family, too. A creditor's grip on Howard, leverage, position. "How long has your father owed him?" Emmett asked. Nora did not know, but she intended to find out. But Russell Gaines did not wait. He came on a Tuesday morning when Emmett had ridden out before dawn to handle a fence breach on the north property. 3 men on horseback. Nora heard them before she saw them. Too many hooves. Too fast. Lyle's voice pitched high with alarm. "If you have been watching this far, you know this is not a story about luck. This is a story about a woman who chose to fight when she had nothing but her hands and the truth." Hit subscribe and like, because what Nora is about to face alone will take your breath away. She was at the door before she had made the conscious decision to move. Russell Gaines sat on his horse in the yard, not dismounting, the posture of a man who wanted to conduct his business from a position of height. Beside him sat a man Nora had never seen before. 45 years old, smooth-faced, holding a leather document case with both hands. The third rider was one of Russell's ranch hands. "Mrs. Crane," Russell said, "I was hoping to speak with your husband." "My husband is on the north property," Nora said. She stepped onto the porch. "Is there something I can help you with?" "This is a business matter," Russell said. "I am aware of all the business matters on this property," she said. "Try me." Russell introduced the man beside him. "Gordon Slade, County Assessor, here to conduct an official reassessment of the property boundary." Gordon Slade opened his document case and produced a map. He held it up so Nora could see it from the porch. She looked at it for exactly 4 seconds. That was all she needed. The boundary lines on that map did not match the deed records she had spent 2 weeks studying. Approximately 200 acres, including the disputed creek bed, had been redrawn, shifted toward Russell's side. "That map does not match our deed records," Nora said. Her voice was controlled, but her eyes were hard. "I will need an official copy with the county seal and the date of filing. If this is an official reassessment, there should be written notice provided 30 days in advance." "Is there such a notice, Mr. Slade?" Gordon Slade looked at Russell. Russell looked at Nora. The silence stretched. "Lyle," Nora said. The young hand straightened. "Go find which section of the north fence came down and get a crew on it before noon." She turned back to Russell. 4 cattle through a broken fence is a fence problem. We will fix the fence. If you have a legitimate grievance beyond this morning, make an appointment and we will sit down with the water lease documentation and the property surveys and address it properly. But I will not be managed in my own yard, Mr. Gaines, not by anyone." Russell sat very still on his horse, doing the recalculation that men of his kind did when things did not go as planned. Then he turned his horse and left. Gordon Slade followed without a word. Lyle let out a long breath. "Ma'am," he said with something close to reverence. "Go find that fence," she said. After they were gone, Nora went back inside and wrote down every discrepancy she had seen on that map, every line that did not match, every shifted boundary. She put her notes with the water rights document in the locked drawer of Emmett's desk. Emmett came home that evening. Nora told him everything in sequence: the visit, the map, the altered boundaries. Gordon Slade. "Gordon Slade is the county assessor," Emmett said. His voice had gone flat. "If he altered an official map, that is a federal matter." "I know," Nora said, "and Russell is using him. The question is who else Russell has been using. Then she told him about RG, the $2,000 debt in her father's ledger. Russell Gaines, the pieces were forming a pattern now. Russell had not just been attacking the Crane Ranch from the outside. He had positioned himself around the Hadley family like a vine around a fence post, a creditor, a manipulator, patient and deliberate. But the worst blow did not come from Russell Gaines. It came from her father. The letter arrived on a Thursday afternoon in the fourth week. Dale brought it to Nora because Emmett was occupied, and the return address was from a legal office at the county seat. She opened it, read it twice. Howard Hadley was contesting the deed transfer, not the marriage. Smarter than that. The clause that put Nora's name on the property. He was claiming the arrangement had been made under conditions constituting undue pressure on him as family patriarch and requesting a formal review of the property settlement terms. In plain language, her father wanted her name off the deed. The worst blow never comes from your enemy. It comes from the person you call Papa. Nora put the letter down. She did not stand still this time. She walked out to the back of the house, leaned against the porch post, and for the first time since the letter from Emmett's father had fallen out of that old ledger, she let something crack open. Not the question of whether Emmett was wrong about her, something sharper than that. The question of whether she would ever be enough for her own father to acknowledge. 27 years of that weight pressed into her chest. She looked down at her hands, calloused, scarred, strong, and she remembered something she had known since the night before the wedding. She did not need her father's acknowledgement. She needed her name on that deed. Those were two different things. She went back inside. She took the letter. She went to find Emmett. His jaw tightened when he read it. His hand holding the paper went very still. He signed the agreement, Emmett said. His signature is on the deed. I know, Nora said. Legally, this will not hold. That is not what concerns me. What concerns me, she said, is that my father is willing to go to a legal office and put his name on a document designed to take mine off a deed. She held his gaze. I need to know if you are going to let this become a fight between you and my father that I stand on the side of, or if we handle it together. We go to your father, Emmett said. I give him one chance to withdraw before I respond legally. One conversation. You present your terms, your voice in the room. This is your name on that deed. You do not stand on the side of this. You are at the center of it. They drove to the Hadley property the next morning. Howard sat rigid in the parlor with his lawyer Dunlap beside him, papers arranged precisely, the physical performance of legitimacy. Emmett sat to Nora's left and said almost nothing for the first 15 minutes. He let Howard speak. Let Dunlap interject with legal framing. And he sat with the relaxed attention of a man who was learning, not reacting. Nora watched her father. She could see what lived beneath the posture in the lawyer and the prepared language. Not anger. Papa, she said. Howard stopped. What are you actually afraid of? The room shifted. Dunlap opened his mouth. Nora looked at him briefly and he closed it. Howard's voice when it came was small. You are going to leave us entirely. You are going to be Nora Crane now and have that property and that life, and you are not going to. He stopped. You are my daughter. Nora had not prepared for this. She had prepared for stubbornness, for calculation, for the defensive logic of a man who had made a bad decision and was trying to reverse it. She had not prepared for the raw, undignified truth of a father who was afraid of losing his daughter to the life he had always failed to give her. Papa, she said, and her voice was gentler. I was never going to stop being your daughter. That was never part of this. But I am also Nora Crane now, and my name on that deed is not a threat to this family. It is the first time in my life that my name has meant something in a room. I need you to let me have that. Then she asked the question she had been holding since she connected RG to Russell Gaines. Papa, who suggested this to you? Who told you this was the right move? Howard was quiet too long. Nora read his face the way she had read it her entire life. Russell Gaines, she said. Not a question. Howard looked at his hands. He told me that if your name was on the deed, the water lease terms would become legally complicated for me. And he cleared my debt at the feed store, $2,000, as a gesture of goodwill. Nora sat still. The anger she felt was not hot. It was cold and precise, directed not at her father, but at the entire architecture Russell had built around her family. You were used, Papa, she said. There is a difference between being used and choosing wrong. Now we fix it. Howard looked at Dunlap. Pack your papers, he said. Emmett spoke quietly. Howard, my wife's name stays on the deed. But you have our word, my word and Nora's word, that this family is not being left behind. That is not a negotiation. That is a promise. They drove home in the late afternoon light. Nora sat beside Emmett in the kind of silence that belongs to two people who have just been through something together and do not need to make language out of it immediately. If you have followed Nora's story this far, subscribe, because now Nora has every piece of the puzzle, and Russell Gaines does not know it yet. The drive home from Howard's house should have felt like a victory. Nora had exposed Russell's manipulation. Her father had told Dunlap to pack his papers. Her name remained on the deed. But Nora sat beside Emmett in the wagon and felt something she had not expected. Not relief, not satisfaction. A kind of exhaustion that went deeper than tired muscles or a long day. The exhaustion of a woman who had just watched her own father admit he had been turned into a weapon against her and had not even known it. Emmett did not try to fill the silence. That was one of the things she was learning about him. He understood that some silences needed to run their full length before anything useful could be said into them. "You saw it before I did," he said finally. That it was fear. "I have been reading him my whole life," she said. "You do not have to use that skill for defense anymore," he said. "The reading of rooms and people. You can use it for better things now. I already am," she said. That evening, she sat at the desk in the ranch office and spread out the 3 pieces of evidence she had collected. 3 separate threads that wove into a single pattern. But she needed a fourth, direct proof that Gordon Slade had falsified the assessment map under Russell's instruction. Without that, she had suspicion. With it, she had a case. She decided to wait. Russell had shown over 3 years that he was a strategic man whose impatience would eventually betray him. Nora could outwait him. She had been practicing patience for 27 years. The second month of their marriage settled into a rhythm that felt earned rather than arranged. Mornings began with coffee made without asking, ledgers open on the table, the ranch waking around them while they worked side by side. Nora took over the feed supplier negotiations and secured a new contract that saved 14% annually. She reviewed the eastern fence line with Dale and identified 3 sections that needed replacement rather than repair, which would cost more now but save years of recurring labor. The men on the ranch had stopped adjusting. Dale directed questions to her without checking with Emmett first. Lyle Dunbar had started calling her ma'am the way he called Emmett boss, unprompted. The kind of respect that is only real when nobody told you to give it. One evening on the porch, Emmett said without preamble, "Tell me something I do not know about you." She thought about it. "When I was 14, I broke into my father's locked desk and read his ledgers, found out he was afraid of going broke. That fear drove every decision he ever made about us. I never told him I knew." Emmett was quiet. "14, he said. "Your turn," she said, "something I do not know." He was quiet for a moment. "I almost did not come to your father's house that morning. I sat on my horse at the end of your property road for 10 minutes before I turned up the drive." "What made you turn?" "I thought about the kind of man I wanted to be. The kind who does the conventional thing because it is easier, or the kind who rides toward what he actually believes is right." He looked at her. 10 minutes. "Then I rode." "I am glad you ride fast," she said. He laughed, a real laugh. Full and unexpected. The best sound she had heard in a very long time. The twist that shook the county came on a Thursday morning in their 8th week. A wagon from the Hadley property. Vivian was in it, not visiting. Vivian with 2 cases and a trunk, and the expression of a woman who had made a decision and was finished renegotiating it with herself. Nora was at the door when the wagon stopped. "What happened?" "Papa found a new arrangement," Vivian said. Her voice was steady but only just. "A man named Murray Caulfield from up near the ridge. He is 56 and he has been widowed twice, and Papa says the match is practical." Nora felt the anger come up fast and clean. "I said no," Vivian said. And then, with the specific exhaustion of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has finally set it down, "I said no, Nora. For the first time in my life, I said no to him, and I meant it. And now I need somewhere to be while I figure out what comes next." Nora stepped back from the door. "Get inside," she said. Emmett came in from the field 2 hours later and found Vivian at the kitchen table with tea and Nora across from her. He looked at Nora. She lifted her chin slightly. "Trust me now." He looked at Vivian. "Miss Hadley," he said, "you are welcome here as long as you need." Vivian had been waiting for the condition, the stipulation, the clause that would come attached to the kindness the way clauses always came attached in the Hadley household. When none arrived, something in her face released. Something she had been holding so long she had forgotten she was holding it. "Thank you," she said quietly. Emmett nodded, poured himself coffee, took it out to the porch to give them room. Nora turned back to her sister. "You said no. Do you understand what that means?" That is yours, Vivian. Nobody can take that back. Vivian looked at her hands. It is terrifying, she said. Yes, Nora said. It is, and it is also the most important thing you have ever done. The terrifying part gets smaller. The important part does not. Howard Hadley arrived the following morning. He drove himself. He looked older than he had at the confrontation over the deed. Not dramatically, the quiet erosion of a man who had been lying awake examining decisions he made in daylight. Vivian is here, he said. She is, Nora said. I want to speak with her. She knows that. She will speak with you when she is ready. That is her decision, Papa. Not mine and not yours. I pushed too hard, Howard said. Every decision you have made about us has been practical for you, Papa, Nora said. I am not saying that to wound you. I am saying it because you are standing on my property asking to speak with my sister, and the least I can do is honest. Vivian is safe. She said no to something that would have made her miserable, and she needs time. When she is ready, I will send you a message. Howard looked at his daughter. You are different here, he said. I am the same, she said. You are just seeing me differently. He absorbed that, turned it over. Your mother wants to know if you will both come for Sunday dinner, he said. An offering. Small, imperfect, the only kind he knew how to make. We will come, she said. Emmett, too. He got back in his wagon and drove away, and Nora stood at the door until the sound faded. She let herself feel all of it without closing any of it off. The anger and the ache and the complicated love of a daughter for a father who had failed her in ways he was only beginning to understand. She felt Emmett behind her, not intervening, just there. Sunday dinner, she said. I heard, he said. It is going to be uncomfortable. Most things worth doing are, he said. She turned and looked at him and said for the first time, not as a calculation or a conclusion, but as a thing that came out of her because it was true and present, and she was done waiting for the right moment. I love you. The words landed in the still morning air. Emmett looked at her with an expression she had not seen from him before, past the almost smile, open in a way his face rarely allowed. I have known since about the fourth day, he said. I have been waiting for you to be ready to hear it. The fourth day? Day 3, you reorganized the ledger system and told me my filing was sentimental rather than functional, he said. I knew on day 4. She let out a sound that was a laugh and something more than a laugh. That is not romantic. It is true, he said. I told you I prefer true. He took her face in both hands the way he had at the wedding. She reached up and held his wrists, and the morning held them both, and nothing needed to be added to it. Sometimes help comes from the place you least expect it. From the daughter of the very man who tried to take everything. The fourth piece arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in their 3rd month. Jolene Gaines rode up to the ranch alone. She found Nora at the fence line reviewing a section Dale had flagged for replacement. Jolene dismounted and stood holding her horse's reins, and Nora could see that she was shaking, not from the cold. I have something you need to see, Jolene said. She opened her saddlebag and pulled out a folded document. Nora took it and opened it, and understood immediately what she was looking at. It was the original assessment map, the one filed with the county before Gordon Slade had altered it. The boundary lines on the original matched the Crane deed records exactly. 200 acres of disputed territory sat clearly on the Crane side, including the creek, including the land above the water table. Nora looked at the original and then mentally compared it with the version Slade had brought to her yard. The discrepancy was precise, deliberate. Professional forgery executed by a county official at the instruction of a private landowner. Why? Nora asked. Jolene met her eyes. Because my father has destroyed everything he has touched with greed. He drove my mother away. He has pushed out every person who ever worked for him. And now he is trying to take what does not belong to him from the only person in this county I have seen who actually deserves what she has. She paused. I am not doing this for you. I am doing it because it is right. Nora looked at Jolene for a long moment. She saw a young woman who had grown up watching a father's worst instincts and had chosen to become something different. She recognized that. She recognized it with a specificity that hurt. Would you like some tea? Nora said. Jolene stayed an hour. Nora did not promise anything. She did not explain what she would do with the document. She said only one thing. I will make sure your name is not dragged into whatever happens next. Jolene nodded. Then she rode away, and Nora stood in the yard, watching her go, thinking about Vivian the night before the wedding, about women who carry difficult truths and finally choose to set them down. Now she had everything. The water rights claim, the original map versus the forged one. The $2,000 debt Russell had used to turn Howard into a weapon, and the word of Russell's own daughter. She called on Lawyer Prescott the next day, laid the 3 pieces of evidence on his desk, and sat across from him while he read. Prescott was methodical. He charged by the hour and was accustomed to clients who talked too much. He read in silence. Looked up once. "Where did you study?" he asked. "I did not," Nora said. "You should have," he said. Then he read for another 10 minutes. "You have built a more complete case than any attorney I have encountered in 15 years of practice." "I do not want to litigate," Nora said. "I want a meeting. At the county judge's office. Russell, Emmett, myself, and you. I want Russell to see everything at once in the same room." "You could put him in prison with this," Prescott said. "He has a decent daughter," Nora said. "I am not interested in destroying a family. I am interested in ending this. Permanently. Stay until the end." Because when Nora Hadley walks into the county judge's office with a thick envelope and sets it on the table in front of Russell Gaines, he will understand that the ground has shifted beneath him and there is no way back. The Sunday dinner came first. Nora had insisted on it. Whatever was about to happen with Russell Gaines, she wanted her family on solid ground before the ground shifted. They gathered at the Hadley table, Howard at the head with the careful dignity of a man rehearsing a better version of himself. Marjorie served with focused industry. Vivian was quiet at first, then slowly something in her began to ease. She offered an opinion without hedging it. She pushed back gently on something her father said, and Howard received it not with dismissal, but with genuine consideration. Emmett talked with Howard about cattle prices and the county road petition, and did it with the easy competence of a man who knew exactly how to hold a room at a comfortable temperature. Nora watched him do it, and felt the warmth of seeing someone you love be exactly who they are. After dinner, she and Howard stood alone in the kitchen. "He is good to you," Howard said. "He is," Nora said. "Better than I." He stopped himself. "Yes," she said quietly, "but you are trying now, Papa. That counts." Howard looked at his daughter with the specific attention of a man who was trying to see something he had spent a long time not looking at directly. "I do not know how to say what I want to say," he admitted. "You do not have to say it today," she said. "We have time." Something in his shoulders released. They joined the others on the porch, and the evening moved forward. It was not perfect. It was not the uncomplicated ease of people who had never hurt each other, but it was real, and real was always worth more than perfect. The meeting at Judge Wendell Foote's office took place on a Wednesday morning. The room was plain, a long table, wooden chairs, the county seal on the wall behind the judge's desk. Nora and Emmett sat on one side with Prescott. Russell Gaines sat on the other with Gord Slapeload and Russell's private attorney. Judge Foote sat at the head of the table and said nothing. He had read Nora's file in advance. Russell sat with the confidence of a man who still believed he controlled the board. Gordon Slade sat beside him with considerably less comfort. His hands were folded tightly on the table. Nora opened her case. Not Emmett, not Prescott. "Nora, Mr. Gaines," she said, "I am going to present 3 things. When I am finished, you will have one choice to make." She placed the first document on the table, the subsurface water rights claim filed 22 years ago by Emmett's father. Legal ownership of all water resources beneath the surface of the Crane property and the disputed boundary zone. Purchased legally. Recorded properly. Binding. Russell's face changed. The confidence did not collapse. It drained, slowly and completely, the way color leaves a man's face when he realizes the thing he has been chasing for 3 years was never available to him. She placed the second set of documents on the table. 2 maps side by side. The original county assessment with boundary lines matching the Crane deed, and the altered version that Gordon Slade had presented at the Crane Ranch 6 weeks ago with 200 acres shifted toward Russell's property. "Mr. Slade," Nora said, "you recognize both of these." Gordon Slade looked at the maps. Then he looked at Russell. Then he looked at the table. He did not speak. She placed the third document down. A record of the $2,000 debt Russell had forgiven Howard Hadley in exchange for Howard filing a legal challenge to remove Nora's name from the deed. The timing, the amounts, the connection. "I have sufficient evidence to refer both of you for federal prosecution," Nora said. "Assessment fraud and financial coercion." Her voice was level, controlled, the voice of a woman stating facts that did not require emotion to carry their weight. "But that is not why I am here." She paused, and the room was so quiet she could hear Dale Mossman breathing in the doorway where he stood watching. "I am here because I want this finished," she said. "You signed the revised water lease. Language I drafted. No ambiguity, no gaps. You acknowledge the original property boundary. Mr. Slade files the corrected assessment with the county, and we all move forward." Russell looked at Nora. She could see him making his final calculation, running through every option, every angle, every possible move, and arriving at the conclusion she had known he would arrive at. There were no moves left, and if I refuse, Russell said, then I give everything to the judge sitting behind you, Nora said, and you will not have any decisions left to make. Judge Foote cleared his throat once from the end of the table. A quiet sound, an official sound. Russell Gaines picked up the pen. He signed the revised water lease without another word. He signed the boundary acknowledgement. Gordon Slade signed the commitment to refile the original assessment with the county records office. Nobody spoke while the signatures dried. After Russell left, after Gordon Slade followed him out without looking at anyone, Dale Mossman stood in the doorway and let out a long breath. 3 years, he said. That man has been a problem for 3 years. He was a problem that had not been solved properly, Nora said. There is a difference. Dale looked at her with the expression she had come to recognize, the look of a man who kept finding that his estimate of someone needed revising upward again. Yes, ma'am, he said. Emmett had said nothing during the entire proceeding. He had sat beside her and let her lead, and when they walked out into the daylight, he stopped on the courthouse steps and turned to her. I told your father I wanted you because when things go wrong, you'd not hesitate, he said. I did not know the half of it. Now you do, she said. 3 months after the wedding, Vivian found her footing. It came quietly, the way real things always came. A position managing accounts for the county's largest dry goods store, offered by the owner's wife, who had heard enough versions of the story to form a strong opinion about the Hadley women. Vivian told Nora on a Tuesday afternoon across the same kitchen table where she had sat with her tea the day she arrived with her 2 cases. It is not what I was raised for, Vivian said. No, Nora agreed, but it is mine, Vivian said. The first thing that is actually mine. Nora felt the echo of that so sharply she had to take a breath. Yes, she said, that is exactly what it is. The moment that would stay with Nora longest came on a quiet evening in the 4th month. Not a dramatic moment, not a crisis resolved or a confrontation won. Just the end of a long working day, the 2 of them on the porch, the ranch settled around them. Dale had told them that morning that the Gaines dispute was completely resolved. The revised lease was signed and filed. The corrected assessment was on record. The relationship between the 2 properties was the most functional it had been in a decade. The new feed supplier contract was performing well. The eastern fence line was solid. The herd was healthy. Emmett said, Dale wants to know if you will take the lead on the spring purchasing decisions. She looked at him. He wants to know, or you decided and you are attributing it to Dale? He paused. Both, he admitted. She almost smiled. Yes, I will take the lead. You could have asked me directly, she said. I could have. I wanted to see if you would catch it. I always catch it, she said. I know, he said. That is one of my favorite things about you. Nora looked at this man who had ridden toward her on a gray roan horse when everyone else was riding toward her sister, who had sat across from her and met every condition without flinching, who had defended her to her own father in words she only learned about weeks later, who had said I love you on day 4 and waited until she was ready to hear it. She thought about the kitchen in her father's house, the years of being careful and quiet and positioned at the edge of every room. She thought about the rainstorm and the calf and the lantern in her hand and doing what needed doing when no one was watching. She had been doing that her whole life. She just had not known until now that someone had been watching all along and that it had led her here, to this porch, this life, this man, this version of herself that she had been building in the quiet of all those invisible years without knowing what she was building it for. Nothing had been wasted, not a single year of it. Emmett, she said. Yeah, he said, already looking at her. I want you to know something, not because it needs saying for any particular reason, just because it is true and I believe in saying true things. Tell me, he said. I am exactly where I want to be, she said. Not where I ended up, not where things worked out, where I want to be. She held his gaze. There is a difference, and I need you to know I know it. Emmett was quiet for a moment. The good quiet, the kind that meant something was landing exactly where it was aimed. Then he reached over and took her hand. Without ceremony, without announcement, because that was what he did when they were in the same space and the day was winding down and the world was manageable and theirs. I know, he said. So am I. They sat together on the porch of the Crane Ranch as the last of the light left the sky. 2 people who had chosen each other across every obstacle that stood between the choosing and the having. The land around them was quiet. The herd was settled. Somewhere in the county Opal Trent was telling someone the 4th version of the story. the true one, the one that made people sit up a little straighter. And inside the house, a name was written on a deed that could not be removed, a name that had always deserved to be there, and now it was. And if this story meant something to you, share it. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that the ground beneath their feet is theirs.